Jennifer Achari is an amazing woman. She has got a PhD in alternative education for kids with trauma. She is a lecturer at Edith Cowan University, and she is genuinely the most amazing, beautiful human being. And I would really like to introduce you to her and welcome her to the stage. Jennifer Achari, people.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening, everyone. It is an absolute honor to be here tonight, surrounded by people who believe that children deserve every opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive. As Kim said, I'm a lecturer in trauma-informed education at Edith Cowan University. But tonight, I do not want to focus on the research and statistics of childhood trauma. Tonight, I want to focus on stories. The stories of young people trying to find their way home. Because behind every number is a name, behind every label is a life, and behind every student who walks into a school like Parkerville Grove is a story still being written. So let me begin with a story about a little girl. She was born into a family that from the outside might have looked ordinary. But at the age of just 4 months old, the ground beneath her began to shift. Her mother was living with severe mental illness, and her father was battling addiction. Her home was unpredictable, unsafe, and fragile. And so, in an act born not of cruelty, but of incapacity, her mother made a decision. She made a phone call to a local church, and with that one phone call, a baby girl was placed in the arms of strangers. Not because she wasn't loved, but because her parents could no longer care for her. For a baby, abandonment is not a concept. It is a sensation. It is the loss of a voice, a smell, a rhythm. It is the body learning, far too soon, that the world is uncertain. So that baby girl moved between several caregivers in that first year of life. Her mother tried, but mental illness is not defeated by love alone. Instability became the backdrop of her childhood. There were periods of poverty so deep that food banks and Christmas hampers weren't charity, they were survival. There were many instances where violence and abuse echoed through the walls. There were adults who should have protected her and didn't. By the time she reached school, she had already learned lessons no curriculum teaches. She had learned to scan a room before entering it, to read tone before content, and to anticipate danger before it arrived. Teachers saw distraction, inattention, and defiance. What they didn't see was a nervous system that had been trained for vigilance. By high school, she was spending more time in student services than in classrooms. On paper, her trajectory looked predictable. If you measured her childhood using the Adverse Childhood Experience Indicators, she would score a 7 out of 10. The research from the Adverse Childhood Experience Study show that when a child experiences 6 or more of these adversities, the risks for addiction, mental illness, and chronic disease rise dramatically. The shocking fact is that multiple childhood adversities can shorten a person's lifespan by up to 20 years. But these numbers cannot quantify what it feels like to wonder whether you are wanted, and they cannot measure the weight of growing up too fast. And they cannot capture the quiet determination that forms in a child who refuses to disappear. You see, statistics are not destiny, Numbers may predict risk, but they do not decide who we become. Behind every statistic is a story. And that little girl, well, she's standing in front of you tonight. When I was in year 8, I had just come out of a safe home for women and children escaping domestic violence. The word home felt complicated. It always had. I always had a roof over my head, but I did not always have safety. After living in that transition house, I was assigned a state-appointed counselor. She was kind and patient, and she tried to get me to talk about what had happened, but I couldn't. I didn't have the language for the trauma that I had suffered my whole life, and I didn't have the emotional capacity to unpack it. So after weeks of silence, of me not wanting to discuss any of my real issues, she did something simple. She placed a piece of paper and colored pencils in front of me. And she said, "You don't have to talk, you can draw." And so I did. And you know what I drew? Rainbows. Nothing else, just rainbows. 13 years old, fresh out of a safe house, carrying more trauma than any child should carry, and yet I drew rainbows. And I didn't know why. But the counselor told me that drawing rainbows was a good sign. She told me that rainbows are a sign of hope. Hope. That is what I had deep down inside of me, because even in the storm, something in me believed there had to be more for me than this. That after chaos, something steady could appear. That somewhere a path might exist that could lead me somewhere safer, somewhere brighter. My journey from complex childhood trauma to who I am today was not a straight line, and it was not something I did alone. Along the way, there were people who stepped in when I needed them most. When I was 18, a youth worker helped me transition into a college with smaller class sizes so I could finally receive the support I needed to succeed in my studies. And that moment mattered, because education did not just give me knowledge, it gave me possibility. It gave me structure, belief, and a pathway forward when my life could easily have taken a very different direction. And that is why, years later, when I undertook my PhD in trauma-informed education, I returned to my 13-year-old self and that image of rainbows. Although my research was about students with complex trauma who enter into alternative schools, much like Parkerville Grove, the thing that stood out to me most in the research was hope. And so, the final outcome of my research resulted in a trauma-informed education model shaped like a rainbow. And the design draws on an ecological approach to education, one that places the student at the center and recognizes that their success is shaped by the systems surrounding them: relationships, school culture, leadership, and community. A rainbow only appears when light breaks through the storm. It is the meeting point between turbulence and hope, between pressure and possibility. A moment that reminds us that even after the darkest skies, something beautiful can still emerge. And that image mirrors a story many of us know well. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy begins in a world that is literally black and white, a place where life feels constrained, ordinary, and a little bit heavy. And in that moment, she sings a song of hope, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It is a song about longing, about believing that somewhere beyond the storm clouds, there might be a place where life feels lighter, where troubles melt away, where things are finally okay. But Dorothy does not reach that place without a storm. In the story, a cyclone lifts her from everything familiar and drops her into a strange and uncertain land. And from that moment on, Dorothy's entire journey is about finding her way home. Along the way, she meets companions who believe they are missing something essential: a brain, a heart, and courage. And they travel miles in search of the great and powerful Oz, hoping he will give them what they do not have. But when they finally arrive in his presence, something unexpected happens. They discover that what they were searching for was already within them. What they needed was not something new. They needed someone to help them see what had been there all along. And the same is true for young people who have lived through storms in their own lives. They arrive at school with strengths, resilience, and potential, but sometimes they need someone to notice it, to reflect it back, and to create the space where it can grow. Often, it only takes one solid, consistent adult relationship to change the trajectory of a life. And yet, it is also the wider community, the teachers, mentors, counselors, and peers working together that allows potential to flourish fully. And that is exactly what Parkerville Grove School is built for. Parkerville Grove is more than any other school. It is Western Australia's first purpose-built alternative school designed from the ground up with trauma-informed principles at its core. Before they even open their doors, the team has made a deliberate decision to understand the impact of trauma and design every aspect of the school with intention. From class sizes to daily rhythms, this is a school being built not just for education, but for healing and belonging. And it is an honor to walk alongside them as they bring this vision to life, grounded in the belief that when young people are supported consistently, they don't just survive, they flourish. Because the young people who enter the school are not arriving lacking capacity. They arrive with untapped potential. They arrive with strengths shaped by adversity, often misunderstood. What they lack is not ability, but belief in themselves and in the future. That belief begins in consistent, safe, connected environments. In other words, home. For some, there is no place like home is not nostalgia. It is a longing. And for many, school is where that longing is first met. And that is what Parkerville Grove Community School represents, a place that sees behavior as communication and recognizes survival responses for what they are. A school that asks not what is wrong with you, but what has happened and how do we walk with you forward? The staff at Parkerville are not denying the storm. They are building the rainbows after it. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer a young person is this: you are safe here. You matter here. You belong here. You are home. And tonight, we become part of that story. By being here, we are choosing to believe in young people who have been overlooked, underestimated, and unheard. Each of us has a role. Through our support, our partnership, our belief, we reflect back what has always been within them: their courage, their worth, and their potential. We help them find their way home. Because when we show up, as we have tonight, We are not just supporting a school, we are changing life trajectories. Together, we can ensure every child has a place to belong, a place to feel safe, a place to be home, a place where light breaks through the storm and rainbows of possibility are born. Thank you.
Jen, thank you. Your story reminds us that behind every statistic that we talk about this evening, there is a real child.